Okay, welcome to part two. This is just going to be the finale as far as what we call the cam sensor. What did I call it? I forgot. I'm getting a brain cramp. What did I call it? How good the cam sensor is at a backup. Basically, we're going to look at situations where when the crank sensor goes away, how well the car starts with the cam sensors. And I did a flip out. I changed out one of the orange channel. I'm no longer looking at the battery voltage. I have current ramp the ignition coils because this is just a still shot right here. I want you to see basically I think I said in the earlier video that the gray channel was the first ignition event. I don't believe that to be totally true. The first ignition event decision is sort of a random thing. The PCM will decide when it decides everything is to what coil. It doesn't always have to be number one, as you see right here. It could be 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, 4, it depends on when everything is in the proper place for the combustion process to take place and the thing to run properly with fuel and spark. So nonetheless, I'm going to start the scope, and I'm just going to do a normal crank to run, and we'll kind of analyze it. So here we go. Crank to run, everything plugged in, everything good. We'll stop the scope and analyze. I'll roll it back. One thing I learned is take a look at the blue channel. That's our power to the crank sensor. In the previous video, I used the orange channel. Basically, some channels will do double duty. They'll give you more information than what they're intended. Not only is this telling me that I have power to the crank sensor, but I know the difference between cranking and running. That's a really good, as we'll see as I into this video, you'll see that'll be more paramount as I continue to make this video. But nonetheless, here we go. This is a cranking scenario. We start cranking. Okay, we're cranking, and then we initially, right here, we got our first spark. Then we got our first shot of fuel, spark fuel, and then we're into running on the combustion process, running normally. Our voltage at feed to the crank is a running voltage. That's 13.5. That means the alternator it's a charging voltage. That validates. Plus, we're nice and smooth. We don't have a lot of hash of the voltage drop you see when you're on a cranking car, but we have everything it takes to run. We have the two good cam signals, the good crank signal. Fuel is completely sequential here, and the spark is at the right time. You can see the number one trigger and the number one coil vent are right in line with one another, as they should be. So basically, I'm going to do a situation now where I want to look at cranking the vehicle without a crank signal. So here we go. We'll start and take a look. The second one was with the crank signal. Now we'll analyze the pattern. Anyway, the first one let's go back. Okay, here's the crank. Here's why I just turn the key to start right here. I want to measure that time just to get an idea of crank time when we lost the crank signal. Okay, that's about 261 milliseconds. Let's see that. Let's go to the next capture. Okay, we're still cranking. From here to here, we can still see our cranking voltage right here. We're about, about 10.8 volts. It's starting to pick up. Right about here, it starts to run. So we got crank time. Again, on that first capture, and we also got the gap to consider. Our crank time is about a second, which is pretty long. Some customers, would complain, but what we can see here on this capture that we have spark and we have fuel. We do have a gang fired on the injection. But bottom line is we're not running. I think the PCM right in this area, the PCM is learning something. It's trying to say, I don't have a crank signal. Well, I have to deduce things with these two cam signals. So take a look at this. This is our ignition. This is our fuel. Our injection is fairly wide. Here's our number one trigger. As we roll into the to the running process, let's see what it looks like between running and cranking, when it actually starts to run on the combustion process. We can see that. Here's spark, here's fuel, spark, fuel, spark, fuel, spark, fuel, spark, fuel. But for some reason, it starts to get it right here. Here's our spark, here's our spark, here's our fuel. And now it actually starts to run on its own, not run by being cranked. You can see the voltage here is higher, and so it's actually starting to run. So let's take a look at that. And now we're running normally. See, it figured out where everything is with the two cam signals, and was able to get the car running. A little extended crank, but nonetheless, it's able to do it at a disadvantage. So what I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna disconnect the intake cam and see how well it starts in that situation. Let me shut the car off. Disconnect the intake cam, and we'll analyze everything cranking. So here we go. Intake cam disconnected. Let's start the scope. Okay. That almost felt normal, almost like it wasn't really affected by the intake cam being disconnected. Nonetheless, we'll analyze it. Let's go back to the initial start. We can see. Okay, we're right here. We're cranking. We're still cranking, as you can see by the cranking voltage in blue. It's hashy, choppy. Right around here, it starts to run on the it runs on the combustion process, or actually the way it's supposed to run on spark and fuel. You can see along this is 100 milliseconds per division. So we're talking about a second right here of cranking, which could be long for people. There's fuel right here. Here's spark fuel right here. They're kind of take a look at this. They're sort of close. It's sort of a little distant here. It's kind of learning right here. They're, it's figuring out where everything is, and right here is when it kind of says, okay, I'm running. I know everything is. I'm able to run this car without an intake cam. As you can see, it's missing the gold in here. We have a flat line there. We don't have an intake cam signal. Nonetheless, it's still able to, when we have a crank signal, we obviously have power, we have ground to the crank. And as a final deal, I'm going to see what it does with the exhaust cam sensor disconnected. And we'll take a look at that, and only that. And then we'll end this thing. Okay, exhaust cam sensor disconnected. Let me start the scope. We'll crank it. Get more time here. Here we go. A lot harder to crank the car. We started with the exhaust cam sensor disconnected, so we'll kind of analyze that. I did it a few times. The first time it's kind of a roulette thing, it's a random thing. It depends where anything ended up on the previous start or stop when the crank stopped. So basically, I think the worst of them. We'll go through them all. And I could remember the first one was good. It was really unaffected by it, and it almost started almost normally. So here we go. Let's look at the first one. We're cranking here. We do not have our, in purple, we are missing the exhaust cam signal, as you can see, right there, okay? We have some time is transpiring here. We got, let's see the time, we got here to here. Before we get any fuel or spark, We got about a half a second. Okay. Then we're still cranking here. We start to get fuel. We start to get spark, as we can see in burgundy and orange. It's starting to speed up, and it's running. Okay, let me go to the next one, because the next one seemed to take a longer amount of time. Okay, here we go. We're cranking here. We have no fuel and spark down here. How much time has transpired here? Okay, that's about almost a 0.6 of a second right there. Let's go to the next capture. We're still cranking, okay? We can look at now the validator that we're still cranking. This is what is take a look at our voltage here. That's a cranking voltage. You can see that. It's definitely in this whole screen we're not running. The PCM is sort of figuring things out, and you can see how it's a little sporadic on the fuel and the spark. We're missing some injection here. Our spark doesn't look consistent. We have a longer dwell. We have a skinny dwell, a fat dwell, a gap. That took a whole screen. That's a second, pretty much. Let's go to the next screen, and that's a half a second until we start to get, well, actually it's stalled there. It's stalled. It never really ran. Okay, it's not running on the, so the third one, okay, this whole screen is cranking, as you can see, from one end to the other on the blue. That's a cranking voltage. We have no fuel. We have no fuel and no spark up to here in this whole section here. We have a crank signal, and we have a intake cam signal. It is without the exhaust cam signal. So basically that's a second. We know we're 100 milliseconds per division. That'd be a second. And then we're looking about right here. I sort of gave up, and it did not run. So I think I finally got it. The third time was the charm. I went to crank it. We have a crank signal. We have an intake cam signal. For about a half a second, we have no fuel and no spark, as we can see on gray, orange, and burgundy. Let's go to the next capture. Okay, and now we're here. The vehicle eventually started, so we have another second, actually a half a second, and then it's running on its own. So we have that extended crank, and this is where let's kind of key in on what it looks like when it's trying to figure out where everybody is. That's our spark. That's our fuel. Things move on. We get to the point where, let me get right to the point where we go from cranking to running. I'll key in on this section here. Okay, we can see right here we're still cranking all here in the hashy part of this capture, and then all of a sudden it sort of picks up and it runs on fuel and spark here. We can see the difference where it starts to pick up. It is at a disadvantage being it has no exhaust cam signal, but nonetheless it is running with extended crank, and basically that's the end of the capture right there. Anyway, just wanted to make this second part of the video to see where what it looks like when an engine is not getting one of the high priority signals, how it does without a crank signal, where it's able to run on just the cam signals. In this case, this car can run on just one cam signal alone. We proved that in this video. So anyway, signing off, Tactical Technician from Dog Nation. Thanks for watching.